London calling YouTube, London calling everyone, and once again we are joined by guests Gunderson.
Hello.
And Vil.
Hello.
And tonight's topic is Scottish independence, and the idea that they would be independent but still use the pound, even with or without permission. Now, this was really only brought to my attention today. My thought on this is that David Cameron really, wants to keep. He said, he really wants Scotland to stay. And if David Cameron wants that, my advice to the Scottish is, run, bitch, run! However, the idea of, and actually one of the articles, which will be linked in the description, points out that two countries actually uses the US dollar without permission, which is, hang on, is it Ecuador and
Panama?
Yeah, which I didn't actually know. So that's a curious situation. So Gunderson, you suggested this story. Your thoughts on UK independence, Alex Salmond, and the pound?
Scottish independence.
Oh, sorry, UK independence. Sorry, Scottish independence. Carry on.
Well, basically, I have to say it is kind of mad to say we want to be independent, but please let us keep the pound. I mean, what you might as well, if you really want to keep the pound that badly, then you might as well just stay as a part of the UK. But I mean, the thing is, because the only alternative is either using it without permission, which would result in basically your interest rates being set by a foreign country, and it's not a good idea, as Ecuador and Panama have shown with their dubious usage of the US dollar. They could adopt a new currency, but then it would be subject to the inevitable period of instability that all new currencies go through. Or they could try. Well, I mean, the thing is, they have to apply and be accepted for EU membership first before they can use the euro.
Okay.
And the thing is, if they don't have a functioning central bank, then they won't be able to use the euro. And the thing is, but I mean, even aside from this specific story about Alex, this was 2 months ago now, this story about Alex Salmond, what do I think about the issue in general? Like, the only real benefits I can see to it, is that they wouldn't have they'd still have the monarchy, which is that the SNP have done that just to appease the monarchists in Scotland.
Right.
But they wouldn't have, they don't have to put up with the House of Lords anymore. They'd actually have an elected, I don't know if they'd have a unicameral or bicameral legislature, but they would potentially have a more constitutional system rather than this ad hoc shite we've got in the UK. So I can see, in the way the political system works on paper, I can certainly see benefits to Scottish independence, potentially. I don't know what is actually in the SNP's plan regarding these kinds of things. And also the thing is, in terms of, as someone brought up, is that they're a bit more socially progressive in Scotland than, well, at least a lot of England is, especially in the south. And I think one issue that a friend of mine brought up was ages ago, but was apparently something the SNP have promised is to decriminalise pot or something. Which, yes, I can see that maybe the independent Scotland would be more socially progressive than the UK is, than if they stayed part of the UK. That's not really something I know a whole lot about, admittedly. But the thing is, economics-wise, that's the main reason I think Scottish independence would certainly not be worth... It seems like too big a risk, really, to go... Because, I mean, once you go independent, you've got to rely on, well, mostly yourself to sustain. You got to be able to sustain yourself economically, And the thing is, I'm not really convinced they would be able to do it.
Yeah, I definitely see what you mean about them being socially progressive. Of course, let's not forget, we only just introduced same-sex marriage, and Scotland already had it for quite some time before. I don't know quite
No,
how
they
long.
only recently introduced. The idea was introduced in Scotland before, but not. It wasn't actually adopted until very recently, until about a few months ago.
Okay, so they only beat us by a little bit.
But the
Okay.
thing is, their bill was more carefully considered than ours. Like it was more inclusive of trans people for one thing.
Yeah.
Ours was kind of rushed.
Yeah, well, there is at least some good news on that, which I've actually been meaning to cover. That there is a trans manifesto now, which I'll try and remember to link that in the description. So hopefully, trans rights will be or are being considered a lot more. But anyway, sorry, that's a bit off topic. Bill, your thoughts on Scottish independence?
Well, that's a really big issue for an outsider, but for me it comes down to I'm a supporter of anyone seeking independence. Where I draw my bit of confusion is, okay, well, they want to be independent, but they want to shackle themselves to the economy of the United Kingdom from which they're trying to separate. And to me that just doesn't make sense. Then you throw in what's already been pointed out about the problems of other people doing similar, and you'd think that they'd take a step back and realize, okay, if we want independence, we're going to have to accept that our economy is going to suck for a while and build up their own central bank, or if not a central bank, at least build up something that they can use. That's just the harsh reality of it. When you become your own nation, you don't live off of the back of another.
And that's just it. I mean, the thing is, if and the thing is, I keep hearing about how, like, Scottish nationalists seem to have a very overly idealistic idea of how things will be after independence if they do vote for independence. And I don't honestly think they are going to vote for independence, because the pro-union people are still ahead in the polls. Whether or not that'll still be the case in September is yet to be seen. But because basically the only real reason that a lot of Scottish people are considering voting or have decided to vote for independence is because of our current Tory government. That's really the main motivating factor behind it. They feel like, largely justifiably, that these people are out of touch and don't give a shit about them. And the thing is, Scotland only has one Tory constituency as well, and like 47 Labour constituencies. So in that sense, it wouldn't be very beneficial to us in the rest of the UK either, because then we'd be stuck with the Tories would only lose one seat, and the Labour Party would lose 47 seats, which means it would be a lot easier for the Tories to win a general election.
Yeah, there is that shit. We'll have to move to Scotland or somewhere.
But the thing is, the thing is, they get quite a lot. The Scottish government gets quite a lot of money currently from the Exchequer, and the thing is, they wouldn't have that anymore if they left. So, and the thing is, their main ideal for revenue post-independence is the oil industry. But the thing is, that's actually quite an unpredictable industry, especially in more recent years, and as oil in general on planet Earth dissipates. It's not something that they can rely on, because if they rely on it too heavily, then their economy could go tits up pretty easily. And then what happens after that? Either they borrow money, which they may not be able to pay back, or they go into austerity. And the thing is, that's what they've said. Oh, in Scotland they're promising all these wonderful socialist programs, but if you can't pay for them, then what?
Oh, they'd probably end up borrowing, wouldn't they? Sorry, if they can use the pound without permission, why can't they just use the euro without permission until they actually manage to get the euro officially?
I think, that's a good question, actually. I think maybe it's because, well, I mean, Germany is the main country holding up the euro at this time. But that's a good question, actually. I really don't know the answer to that. But it certainly wouldn't be a good idea, because, I mean, even using it with permission, Greece hasn't done very well with that.
Ah, right.
But the thing, and another thing they've brought up is like that they don't really have much influence over what happens in the House of Commons, because, well, I mean, Scotland only has a little less than 9% of the UK population, and therefore they have almost exactly the same percentage of seats in the House of Commons. It's 59 out of 650. So, but the thing is, in that case, they really, it's kind of the same as any other part of the UK that only has 9% of the population. Like, I mean, one thing I've heard them bitch about is that somehow there's a democratic deficit between Scotland and Westminster, which is, I don't know, I just think it's bullshit, quite honestly, because it's like saying that there was a democratic deficit between the home counties and Westminster when the Labour Party was in power. It's just, you might as well just say, well, the party we don't want is in power. That's not a democratic deficit. That's even if they are a bunch of evil twats, which they are. But so yeah, that's, I don't know. I mean, I guess the issue is, well, regardless of whether or not it's a democratic deficit, we can still do better without them.
Yeah.
In which case, yeah, I can understand that. But even though I don't agree. But the last thing I want to say is there's definitely, in pretty much the vast majority of cases that I've seen, there's definitely a kind of subconscious xenophobia to what they say. Because they word it in a way like it's somehow the fact that it's a predominantly English government doing all this stuff to them that somehow makes it worse. The fact that it's do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That somehow that makes it worse just because it's not a Scottish government fucking them over.
Yeah. No, I can definitely see that. Well, I suppose the Scottish, but this could also be said of the Welsh, of people in the north of England. People are sick of everything being centralised for so long. Right, the Scottish have had their own parliament for a while, the Welsh have had their own assembly for a while, and England is trying to become less centralised. But there is a sort of inverted snobbery in a way towards London, I think.
Well, yeah, I guess, and that's all. Well, I mean, that's the thing in the UK. Classes, like economic class, is so heavily associated with accent, which is why I get called a posh twat all the time. Well, not all the time, but I've had it enough that I just want to punch people who say that to me. And I've had the reverse as well. I've had, especially from my own family.
Yeah.
It just fucks me off big time.
Good. Let the hate flow.
At least you're not a southern ponce like me.
Indeed.
Okay, and goodbye to this week's guests from Yorkshire, Gunson.
Bye-bye.
And Bill.
Ea Cthulhu Fatagan.
Yeah. And good night from me, Alex. This has been London After Midnight.
Good band.